Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. Now that you found us, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider. That way you'll get all of our old episodes as well as all of our new episodes as soon as they post. We did a Dolphins episode last week, an NBA/Heat episode. And tonight, this is a Sunday night we're coming to you, we're going to just talk about the Heat. So you can also check out Miami Heat Beat. That's Mike Biamonte, the voice of the Heat inside the arena, the PA man. Was on with them last week. It's great stuff. You got to hear him do his Justice Better, which I think will be iconic in our network. You'll hear it a few thousand times, I believe, on that particular podcast. But today
I'm so jealous of just people with pipes, with just like incredible voices, because I'm a broadcaster and I don't feel like I have them. And so like the moment he starts talking, it's like, wow, that guy has a voice, like a voice that you can understand how in a competition some years ago, Mike Biamonte won the competition to be the voice of the Heat, because my God, would you listen to him? So I was actually driving around listening to that today, which is, of course, the beauty of our podcasting platform, that you don't have to listen to it as it airs. I listened to it days after Miami Heat Beat posted it, but yeah, I was listening to it and it was like, wow, would you listen to him? And it was really enjoyable. I think Heat fans will love that episode.
Well, the crazy thing about it, too, was that the guy with the best voice in our network, probably other than Simon Clancy on 3 yards per carry, because I mean, how could you beat the British guy? But the second best guy, I guess I would say, is Brass Jazz.
Yeah, and he too has the pipes that I'm jealous of. Yeah, unquestionably.
That's John Kozan, and he actually does some, I think, a cappella and some other kind of singing. And it was just funny to hear him on with Mike B, because Brass is great, but Mike B is like next level. So it was pretty fascinating stuff, and should be a lot of fun, if only to hear his Luol Deng.
Luol Deng.
Because that was our favorite. And then he talks on there about how he had to adjust it when Lou came, but he didn't want to make it too, sort of upbeat, because he wanted to keep a little bit. It's sort of like you're doing a cover, right, of a song, and you want to keep a little of the original song, and so I think that's how he was trying to handle that. All right, but let's get into the Heat. We're going to split this one more into 3 parts than 5 parts today, because I think there are 3 major things to get into. The first thing is just simple question that I'm going to pose, and it's kind of rhetorical, but we're going to try to answer it, which is, how did the Heat get this bad? Because I was at the game last night, wrote a column for HeatBeatMiami.com, and I went in hoping to be a little bit more positive, because the Heat was not real thrilled with my first offering about 2 months ago, and yeah, it didn't play out that way. I mean, they lose by 20 plus in a game that they're up 11 against a Detroit team that, I mean, let's just be honest here. I've thrown this out there. If you take the best players on the teams competing for the 7 and 8 spot in the East, so you take Orlando, Charlotte, Miami, and whom I miss, and Detroit, and you throw those players together, you would not beat Golden State in a 7-game series. In fact, you might not get a game unless Kemba Walker or Blake Griffin went off. So we're not talking about great teams that the Heat's competing with to get the 7 or 8 seed. Detroit basically ran the Heat off the floor last night in the fourth quarter with a lineup that included Ish Smith, Langston Galloway, Zaza Pachulia, who I didn't even know was in Detroit, Thon Maker, who was just dumped by the Bucks, and Luke Kennard, who's best known as the guy that Stan Van Gundy took instead of Donovan Mitchell. Those were the 5 guys that ran the Heat off the floor at the start of the fourth quarter. And when asked after the game, Eric Spoelstra was like, I really thought we'd have a good fourth because of the way that we finished the third. So, look, we've danced around this all year. You've posed the question to me, Chris, all year. Is this a bad basketball team? The Heat are a bad basketball team. They just are. And it hasn't totally shown up in the net rating, but they are right now in terms of net rating. And, let's put it this way. In terms of wins, they're the 3rd worst team in the league in wins that's not openly tanking. Okay? So you throw these teams out of the mix. Phoenix, the Knicks, who scored on their own basket tonight at the start of the game.
Did they really?
Yes.
I have the game on. I have the game on right now as we tape, and they're doing that thing where they win, which is shocking to me.
Well, no, they tried not to win at the beginning. I mean, they haven't won a home game in about 2 months. They're 11-48 overall. But it's Phoenix, the Knicks, the Bulls, the Hawks. You wouldn't know it because they've dominated the Heat. Those and Cleveland. Those are the 5 teams that we know they're openly tanking. So the only teams that are worse than the Heat in wins right now are the Wizards and the Grizzlies. And that's it. Of the teams that actually started the season trying. And with Memphis, I'm not quite sure. Like with Washington, I am. But Memphis has now traded, their franchise icon in Marc Gasol. So you have like 6 teams that aren't trying, which are worse than the Heat. And then you have one in Washington that was trying, but also lost their $40 million point guard. So I just don't know how you dance around it anymore.
And you have New Orleans that is a team that is in the middle of losing its franchise superstar, and who knows, maybe its franchise. Like they're it's just one of those. I'm sorry, I was looking at the last 10 games on the year. They're actually a positive. Now I guess the raw number isn't that bad, right? It's a negative 1.1, which I mean generally has you at a 38 win team, which is maybe like 39-40. But yeah, I'm just to me losing 8 of their last 10. I haven't really watched the game. I mean, obviously last night was a calamity, but before that, the Philly game, I thought they were very competitive. The Golden State game, it goes without saying. I think the Denver game was a schedule loss, but the Friday night in Sacramento, really since they lost to Chicago at home at the end of January, have I really thought that the Heat played really poorly as they did last night. And to me, bridging the gap between, I was making fun of, as like, all the Heat fans, on our network and on social media, as the Dolphins are losing and the Canes are losing, like, oh, I can't wait for Heat season to start. And I'm making fun of them going, well, your team's just going to go 43-39 and lose in the first round of the playoffs. And for them to even fall short of that, I just can't understand it, because okay, so they went on a 30-11 run, and it was fool's gold. But the next year, they got to the playoffs. We talked themselves into being competitive, and so I wasn't expecting for a fall off to happen. I understood that they wouldn't be anywhere near the top 4 and even the top 5 in the East, but for them to be this far off of Detroit at home, I just don't understand how it's fallen off this much.
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for it. I think the biggest reason to me is the competing agendas inside the team. And I just think when you look at 30-11.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that I don't think that various people in the front office and the coaching staff are pulling in the same direction. And I think it's totally confused the players. And the only reason that the team, did what it did a couple of years ago and even last year was they overachieved by a lot. I mean, by a lot. This is not a 43-win roster to me. It's just not in the modern NBA. I mean, they're small in certain areas. They're duplicative at a lot of positions. They don't have a player who's, better than a B+ on a good day. Most of their players are closer to B-. They have players who don't fit together. You play one guy, and basically you're going to get something, but you're going to give up something else. I mean, Kelly Olynyk's a perfect example of this. Like, you need Kelly Olynyk spacing, but if you're going to play him, if you have a 4 who's competent on the side, he's going to torch Kelly. And that was the same with Wayne Ellington, who I spoke to last night, who, by the way, was giddy to be in Detroit. And this is a guy we talked to before the season who was giddy to re-sign with Miami. I mean, he wanted to get the hell out of here. And I just think what's happened is that this team had no direction this year other than, okay, we've got a bunch of guys on contracts. We hope we can resurrect their value. We've got some young guys we want to play. And we're basically going to sort of, patch over this, I hate to say it, this dog with some, some icing, known as Dwyane Wade and Vice jerseys. And hopefully that'll get us through. And look, the Heat have had seasons that haven't been particularly memorable under Pat, okay? Now, this is going to be only their 5th sub-500 season, because they are going to be sub-500. You look at the rest of their schedule. They play more playoff teams than they don't the rest of the way. And the home thing doesn't mean anything for them, because even though they have 2 more home games than road games, they're 11-17 at home. I mean, the Dolphins won 6 home games this year. The Dolphins 6. Okay, the Heat have only won 11. They played 28. I mean, the Dolphins did that in 8, and Adam Gase, rightly so, got fired.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, we talk about Washington being worse than Miami by a few games. They're 5 games above 500 at home. We talk about Atlanta being a tanking team. Atlanta's 10-18 at home compared to Miami 11-17. Like, Miami are appalling at home.
Yeah, and Dwyane said it yesterday. So you have all of these things that are going on. Also, it doesn't help. The home crowds the games I've gone to have not been energized like even they were last year. I just think they're just sick of this group. And it's not the group's fault. Like, it's just, it was this thing to do what it did 2 years ago is even more remarkable in retrospect. But if you look at it, they sort of developed a formula. Like, Dragic and Waiters played really well together for a 2.5 month period, and they kind of fed off of that. They found a role for James Johnson. Now, James Johnson comes back. He's not in the same shape. Doesn't seem, I don't know if he's not as motivated. I don't know. He just doesn't seem like the same player he was before the injury. And then, he also just regressed hard to the mean. Then you have a guy like Rodney Magruder, who, is starting last night. Now, look, he got hurt, and he probably should have been pulled. They end up having to play Duncan Robinson, who, if you don't know, is not, a former San Antonio Spur, but is a shooting prospect they got out of the G League, who is an interesting prospect. But you've got Duncan Robinson, I know you didn't have Justice, but sort of starting the second half, okay, in a critical game against Detroit. I mean, a game that if you want to make the playoffs was very important. It's a mess, and I think they hope they could get rid of more players sooner. They could create roles for certain guys. I mean, think about it. They've been this bad, and Whiteside has exceeded our expectations, Chris. Like, how is that happening?
And I don't know, like, to be honest, so I'm looking at the last 10 games, which is when they've lost 8 out of 10, and Justice Winslow has far exceeded my expectations, and I think has exceeded the expectations of a lot of people, even the people that were bullish on him for what he's contributed. You look at the last 10, he's a plus 16. Like, that is as good as it gets in the NBA. Olynyk is a plus 12. Magruder, who I think has taken his fair share of criticism, perhaps rightly, is a plus 9 in this period. Bam is a plus 5. Josh Richardson's a plus 2. Like, you have players that are developing well, that are helping you win, and yet there's a couple of guys on the back end of the roster that are they sapping it to that degree that they're unplayable? Like, I just didn't think that, okay, James Johnson, it's a disastrous contract. And you know, I certainly have taken my fair share of criticism from our group about how much I think it should be pointed out. It should be pointed out at every turn. These contracts are disasters. But I didn't think he was a bad player. I just thought that he was an overpaid player. Those are two different things. Just as we talked about with Tyler Johnson, when he was traded to Phoenix, I didn't think he was a bad player. I just think he's an overpaid player, and I don't think that it should sort of come with the character smears that generally come with players that are overpaid. But James Johnson's just bad now, and obviously the Dwyane Wade retirement tour is fun. He's not helping them win. Like, in this period, he's a -8, and obviously you're trying to chase these moments, and you're trying to chase these end of game moments where he's taking big shots, but he doesn't, on a night-to-night basis, really help you win. He's always been someone who, in order to figure out ways to play every night, has not really... And I'm not, again, begrudging him for this. He's not really giving his maximum on every possession and closing out on every, you know, on every defensive opportunity. Like, he is not a player, and he has to in order to manage minutes, in order to be able to play every night. But he doesn't help you win, and so I'm just amazed that there are players that are that much of a sap. Not that Dwyane is, but more that James Johnson and even Tyler Johnson when he was still with the team, and Whiteside to some extent, and Waiters, that these guys are such saps now that it's to the point where, as you said, they're bad, and they're, you know, more than a few games under 500, which again I wasn't expecting. They're 26-32, and they're a half game behind Orlando, who won again today at Toronto, and that Orlando is better than them. I couldn't have imagined before the year.
But you said that though. But I mean, let's go back. I mean,
yeah, sure.
This was the argument that you had with our Giancarlo Navas when you basically said if you didn't have Spoelstra, you would be the Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they're worse than the Magic, and they do have Spoelstra. So how much worse are they really in theory? Because you know, you say they're I think what's happened here is you have players who were average, and now they're not motivated, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the worst possible combination. Like, with a lot of these guys, I mean, they paid them. Like, I mean, they paid James Johnson, they paid Dwyane Wade, they paid all these guys, and they're just, and now not only are they not motivated, but they're frustrated. I mean, what's going to start to come out? I mean, Wayne Ellington is like the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Like, he's not a complainer, okay? But he made it known to people, you know, I know reporters he talked to, like when he was still here, like how badly he wanted to get out of the situation, like that. And then, you know, look at my Instagram from last night. Like, look at the smile on his face. I mean, that's the broadest smile. And he's in Detroit.
Yeah.
He didn't side with LA. He didn't side with, you know, some beautiful warm weather place. He's at
or
Detroit.
even a team that's winning or that's gonna win, right? He didn't go to Toronto to go and chase a championship.
And he said, if you watch the video, it's on 5 Reasons Sports IG, that he said when, you know, the idea that Detroit could knock the Heat out of the playoffs, he said, I know, 6 straight times with a huge smile on his face, and ended it with, I know. Okay, I mean, he wanted out of here. So look. If he is affected by this, right, which Wayne has a terrific reputation, what's Dion putting into it? What's James Johnson putting into it? These are guys that have been passed around to various teams for a lot of different reasons. Like, so are you getting max effort from these guys? And then that locker room yesterday, I'm not in their locker room a lot. I mean, it's not like the old days, but I was in there yesterday. Dwyane was really short, didn't want to be there. Okay, it was very blunt, was like, we're terrible at home. And then, you know, Goran was not really in the mood, and, you know, Goran's a genial figure. I mean, and we've talked on the podcast, and I talked to, you know, with Leif and to Nikias about this. That Spo looks as unhappy as I've seen him, at least, you know, in interviews. I haven't had any direct, you know, interaction with him like I used to, but I was at the presser yesterday. I've been at some of his pressers, and he just doesn't look pleased. And so, and then when you talk to people inside the organization, who deal with him regularly, they say he's not the same in terms of, sort of how he's handling some of this stuff. Okay, that there's a frustration level there. So this is the season that, like, I said, like, this is the season, like, you just want to sort of sweep into the sea. Like, it just there's only three things, all right, that have been of any note this entire year, and that is Dwyane Wade, vice jerseys, and some Winslow flashes. And that's it. Like, there's not. And I posed this question on Twitter, because I sort of came back around to this in a roundabout way, but, like, they've only had 5 losing seasons under under Pat's stewardship. Is this season less enjoyable than 14-15, the year after LeBron left? I feel like that season, like, at least, like, there was, like, that moment where Henry Walker hit a shot at the end of the game, or whatever his name was. There was,
yeah. I mean, you had Chris Bosh for 50 games. You had Dwyane Wade coming back, and you're still emotionally at a place where we're not going to let LeBron James destroy you, and there's still that positive feeling off of having just gone to the finals. Whereas now, I mean, it's so browbeating to see a team that it's the same team on the floor every night that it's been for nearing on 2.5 years now. And there's nothing new on a night-to-night basis. There's nothing that you're getting your hopes up over. There's no player that's going to become a superstar, and so you're just waiting around for cap space, for a trade to be made, for a move to be made that's going to get you out of this mess. And there's just not really been that joy. And to me, and this is something that we want to talk about on this podcast, is that it's kind of, I don't want to say sapped the Dwyane Wade joy, but I don't feel like those moments that people have been wanting have really come that often. I mean, we had one in the Golden State game, and then they lost the game, so you kind of lose that one. Like, is there going to be a video montage of things that Dwyane Wade did this year that is going to carry on, or is it just going to be the montage of the 16-year or the 14.5 or whatever it was years that he was with Miami? Like, I don't know if anything from this year has even really made it on to the highlight reel. So I'm at a loss, and I was talking about this off air about how it went from a team that we were making fun of for being so average to being a team that's bad. And frankly, I mean, now to look the other way as Orlando wins again, and we'll see what Miami can do. Now, they do have 3 of their next 7 at home against the bottom 5. So they're home with Atlanta, home with Cleveland, and home with Phoenix. Again, those are not guaranteed wins because they've lost to Chicago already at home. But that's where they are. They're 10th in the lottery standings. Depending on what New Orleans and Dallas can do, they can perhaps move a little bit lower. I mean, maybe this is the right way for them to go as opposed to being the 8th seed. But still, I thought it's a team that, and Eric Spoelstra said it before yesterday's game, that's going to try to win. They're definitely not going to be the tanking team. He said if we start looking for ping pong balls, then we're all going to be miserable. But I mean, that might be the only silver lining from the season.
Well, it might be, but I mean, what's going to frustrate Heat fans so much is that they're they look like they're headed for 9th or 10th in the East, and people are going to want to know why they didn't turn tail earlier, right? Because if this ends up just like 2 years ago, where they were 11-30, and a lot of people, yourself included, were calling for them to go full tank, and then they went on this miraculous, ridiculous, very fun run. I mean, let's acknowledge it. It was fun at the time. The 13 game.
Yeah, I mean, I gave up on calling for a tank when they beat Golden State at home, and Deion Waiters hits that shot. It's like, all right, this is fun. Like, right, let's have a nice time. Like, in the end, it's just not what the Heat do. Like, as much as they could have, like, they could have traded players, and they could have just gone in the entire. They were never going to, and they don't. And this is what Al from Heat Beat says all the time. It's like, why are you rooting for this when you know they're never going to do it? Like, why are you that interested in it when we know you're basically rooting for them to be bad by incompetence rather than bad by purpose? But they are, though. Right. But that's something that's so surprising to me, is that all these teams are trying. New York is throwing out a lineup every night with the intention of not winning as they're up 9 against the Spurs. Right, yeah, like they send a lineup out there every night with the intention of not winning. The Heat are doing the exact opposite, and they're failing. Like, it's just so weird to me.
Get back to our episode. I want to introduce you to another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is Berlitz Broward. This is the best place to learn a language in South Florida. I can speak to it personally. My daughter, already fluent in English and Spanish, we decided to introduce her to Mandarin. She's not even 5 years old, and she's already out speaking Mandarin, knows all of the numbers up to 100, and she loves it. She loves to go back because the way that they work with her, the way that they teach her, and they also work with me as a parent with her schedule to make sure that it fits in with everything else she's doing. You can also learn languages as an adult. They teach many different languages there. Again, English, Spanish, Mandarin, Italian, German, right across the board. They teach virtually every language that you can possibly name. Here's the number that you call, 954-743-5787. 0077. That's 954-743-0077. Mention that 5 Reasons sent you. They'll take care of you. Never too early to learn a new language. I want to transition to this year and the last 24.
Sure.
Dwyane Wade should start the rest of the way. It's enough. It's enough. It's enough. Okay. Yes, the best moment yesterday, probably the whole thing, was him taking off his warm up and getting ready to come in. Introduce him last. He should start at home at the very least. Okay. Like, what are you doing otherwise? Like, just let him play. What's the worst that happens? So, like you said, if he doesn't contribute to winning, that helps you in the subtle tanking process. Like, enough with Deion as a starter. Enough with Rodney Magruder as a starter. Just start Dwyane. Like, Dwyane should not be finishing his career behind, and much respect for making himself into a player, he should not be finishing his career behind Rodney Magruder. Just shouldn't. Like, not in this circumstance, okay? Not when there's no championship at stake. Just put Dwyane in the starting lineup now, okay? And at least, again, it's another gimmick to a certain degree, but fine, you need one for the last 24. I don't understand why you would wait at this stage and play him 30+ minutes. What are you resting him for? The JCC? Like, just play him. Play him with the 4 kids, because you know what? You put him out there and you play him with the 4 kids. They're going to learn something. They may not win this year, but they're going to learn something. They're going to be better players by playing with Dwyane. A lot of them had their best moments playing with Dwyane. I mean, Bam in particular, I think of late, when Bam's been good, it tends to be when Dwyane's on the floor, right? Justice, I know there's been, some difficulty there at times this year, but I would still do it. Josh, we're not expecting Josh to be, what they were expecting early in the year, which is your killer. It's just not in him, okay? He's a very good, second or third option, I think. He had, the game in Golden State, right, where he scored. He was 35, tremendous.
I think.
Right, but he's not going to do that regularly. He's a little bit Eddie Jones light. I mean, he's better at some things, but he has a lot of Eddie's personality traits. I don't care that Dwyane takes away the moments from him at the end of the game at this point. It doesn't matter to me, okay? We're not where we were, where you're trying to pad Josh's value to maybe get Jimmy Butler or make him your lead person. Chris, I don't know how you feel about it. I know you're not a Dwyane truther like some of us are, but what are you waiting for? What is the upside to not doing it? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I think the bench introductions, if you're doing it for emotional value, I think the bench introductions are fun. I almost kind of think he's settled into the role as well. I mean, we talk about the Heat having players with no roles. Dwyane Wade as a 6th man is really the only one. But yeah, I mean, why not? Like, there's nothing to lose by throwing him in the starting lineup. You might get more people, at their seats at tip off, so that they can see the introductions. I don't. To me, throwing Deion Waiters out there, I mean, he doesn't need to start. I mean, if you have a lineup, again, you're talking about basketball fits with Dragic, Wade, and Winslow. I mean, maybe that doesn't entirely work. Maybe having Olynyk out there facilitates that a little bit.
You need Richardson out there too.
Oh, that's true.
It's complicated. Maybe Goran's the guy that has to go to the bench for now to kind of run the second unit with Waiters. But I guess the question is, do you really think that Eric Spoelstra is going to make that sort of decision? Like, hey, it's Dwyane Wade's, last go at it. We're gonna start him because it's fun and emotional. Because Eric Spoelstra's trying to win games. He's trying to get to the playoffs. But as much as we've given up on that, they haven't. Well, okay, I don't think he has. I don't know. All right, I don't know who's pushing in what direction. Again, like I said, it does not seem like they're all pushing in the same one. But I mean, look, here's my whole thing about it. People like Eric Spoelstra and Dwyane Wade know, right? Like, they know, like they know this is not a good team, like, right? I mean, Dwyane Wade played with LeBron James and Chris Bosh for 4 years. Like, he knows, this ain't it, Chief, right? Right? Okay. Like, you think Eric doesn't know that? Like, Eric was, ecstatic with that team 2 years ago because of the effort they showed and the push that they. But I mean, come on, right? Like,
I'm with you. Like, I've said this is a talent, threadbare roster, but I mean, it might also be his roster next year. Like that's the thing that you also have to consider is, I mean, you're at the risk of losing guys that you maybe have already lost, but I don't know if Eric Spoelstra's at a place where I think professionals. I remember talking to Channing Crowder about this as it relates to football, and they were in practices watching Joey Harrington practice, and they started him over Dante Culpepper just to do something different, and all the guys on the practice were like, wait a second, we are at practice every day. We know Dante Culpepper is better. Like, you might want to scapegoat him because he hasn't been Drew Brees, but like, we know Dante Culpepper is better, and like, professionals know that they're not being given the best chance to win. Like, and maybe, I mean, hell, no one wants to take the ball from him in crunch time, right? So maybe there's the ultimate deference almost no matter what. But I don't know if those guys, if Dwyane Wade is going to feel good about who gives a shit. But who gives a shit? But I mean, like, at the same time, Dwyane Wade is here for 2 more years, and Dwyane Wade isn't. So I don't know. Maybe Dwyane Wade is, that emotional value will eventually weigh on Eric Spoelstra. I just don't think we're ever really going to get there as Eric Spoelstra guy making emotional decisions with his starting lineup.
But he's made emotional decisions with Dwyane many times, many times, and
it's like it's in a basketball context. It's like, well, he's a 17% 3-point shooter, but we're gonna have him take the last 3 because he's clutch and I trust him. Not like, well, he might not be helping us win, but get out there because your last 24 games.
Is, Chris, but it is a basketball context because you can say he's been -8 or whatever in this last 15. But like, is Deion helping them win? Like, so is Rodney helping them win?
No.
Like, you got to throw out the plus-minus number with Rodney. I'm sorry, I watched that first half last night.
No, he's just a guy. Like,
right. I mean, he's
body.
fine to have on a roster. He's a good story, but like, I mean, come on, okay? And I mean, they were using him 30 minutes a game, and I mean, Derrick Jones Jr. to me is a different conversation. There's real upside there. Like, there's something you can mine, but like with Rodney, like, yeah, he's a plug-and-play guy, a 12th man, okay, on a competitive team, but he's not someone who should be starting. He's not someone who should be a 7th or 8th man. So who are we talking about? Like, what I mean, and this idea, well, he'd take the ball out of Justice's hands. Okay, Justice can wait. Like, I'd rather Dwyane take it out of his hands in his final season than Deion or James Johnson keep taking it out of his hands. I mean, that to me is just stupid. Like, and I know you can say, well, they got to be here a couple more years. I'm sorry, you got to bite the bullet on that. Like, you got rid of
bite how? Like, trade?
I don't know. I mean, you may just have to wait the year, okay, and stash them next. It wouldn't be the first time. I mean, look at Chandler Parsons in Memphis. Like, I mean, so if that becomes,
but you're not trading those guys. So you're only either waiving them with the stretch provision or giving up picks in order to get rid of them. Like, and I don't think these are either options that the Heat are up for.
But a year from now, though, they'll be expiring. So what I'm saying is, you have to suck it up for another year. Like, if you decide, like, let's say Deion or James Johnson doesn't like it, so you Chandler Parsons them. I mean, you just banish them, basically.
Yeah.
And I know it's not efficient use of cap space, but you are where you are. I mean, we're not going to discuss again how they got here, but you are where you are. And so my thing is this, okay? This ultimately, sports are about the fans. If you're not winning a championship, you're not competing for a championship. And there are how many teams that are competing for a championship this year in reality? Maybe 6?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, and that's a lot. That's more than there have been in past.
And to me, the best thing that's looming for the NBA is Kevin Durant leaving Golden State, because that number grows exponentially if Kevin Durant is with the Knicks next year. And then the number becomes like 12.
Right. So, okay, so but if you're not one of those teams,
sure.
And the Heat are not one of those teams, they're not, like I said, they're 3rd worst team in the league that's not tanking. Then to me, it's about the fans. It's either about winning a championship or it's about their enjoyment. And the last 24 games, the fans want to see Dwyane Wade. I mean, that's it. Like, they don't care about the rest of this. There's no interest in the rest of it. I mean, you can get them a little bit interested in Justice and somewhat interested in Josh, and that's about where it ends. Like, and they like and respect Goran. And that's it. Like, there's no attachment to anybody else on this team at all. And so, and Dwyane's attachment dwarfs everybody else by 1,000,000% combined. So just give him the 32 minutes. And I have people on Twitter who are like, oh, well, you want to break the man in his last season. Like, no, it's not to try to push him to make the plays. I just want to see more of him.
He's got a lifetime of rest ahead of him.
Right. That's ridiculous. I mean, he's got these bionic knees now that he didn't have 5 years ago.
His off season is the rest of his life.
Right. What are you saving him for? Like, for the boardroom? Like, to fly to China? Like, but there was such a stark contrast because I was in Charlotte and all he did was smile every time I saw him. Smile. Last night, like, I mean, you could have broken glass with his stares. It's just not a fun place to be right now, right? And
he had a particularly worse compared to the rest of his teammates. Dwyane Wade, a team worst -22, and so he was in a mood to be that level of frosty because I mean basically anytime he was on the floor, the Heat were losing. So I mean that only amplifies that feeling.
They were losing in that run to Langston Galloway and Ish Smith. I mean, they weren't.
It's ludicrous. I mean, how was his team so bad?
Detroit's bench is one of the worst in the league. Like, and it doubled the Heat's bench scoring. And don't give me James Johnson was out. Okay, Justice you can throw in there, but you had Goran back.
Johnson
so.
being out's a positive. Like,
well, it has been this year, right? From an on-off standpoint. So that's my take on it. I want to see Dwyane play as much as possible the rest of the way. I think 95% of Heat fans would agree with that. In fact, I'm going to tell you right now because hold on, I tweeted it this morning. I want to see the like total on this.
Yeah. Now for me, I think immediately if you announce that he's starting, like, don't you immediately get an attendance bump? Like, basically what happened with, the Chris Bosh thing, where immediately you get an attendance bump for that Orlando game. Like, I think that might happen if you put Dwyane Wade in the starting lineup. So, I mean, maybe the business people wouldn't mind that.
No, the business people would want that. Here we go. Okay, Hoop Idea. I tweeted this 10 hours ago as we're speaking. Hoop Idea.
Is Hoop Idea still a thing?
No, that's why I used it. I didn't hashtag it, though. Hoop Idea, let Dwyane Wade start and play 30-plus minutes the rest of the season. I mean, fuck it. That was my tweet. I didn't spell it out. 29 comments, 27 of which agreed with me, 104 retweets, and 495 likes. You know what I'm going to do right now as we're here? I'm going to tag at Miami Heat and PR2620. Hold on. I don't know if Pat's...
While Ethan does that, we'll take a quick break.
Hey, it's Seth Levitt here from the Fish Tank with my main man,
OJ McDuffie, the Juice.
And Juice, we've got a special guest over the next 2 weeks in the tank.
What's up, everybody? It's Pat Surtain, and I'm officially diving into the Fish Tank. If he was better than Peyton, he definitely wasn't better than me.
Oh, there we go.
That's what I wanted to get
Yeah, that's where we're going with it.
Did you and Peyton ever play against each other in high school?
Absolutely. Beat him 35-7.
35 to
Get out of here.
Oh, yeah. I had 3 rushing and 2 passing on him, accounted for all 5 touchdowns.
Had hands in all of them.
Yeah.
Hey, Pat came in here saying he doesn't remember stuff, but he remembered
I remember
all of
that.
Make sure you dive into the tank to hear our entire interview with Patrick Surtain here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can catch up on what you've missed and hear new episodes every 2 weeks until July by searching The Fish Tank on Apple Music, Google Play, Podbean, Spotify, or wherever else you find your favorite podcasts.
All right, we're back from the break. I have tweeted at the Miami Heat and at the address we believe to be Pat Riley, even though he doesn't tweet from it. And told him to look at the likes. So basically, there were 495 likes on there as we speak to just let Dwyane Wade start and play 30-plus minutes the rest of the season. I mean, fuck it. And I believe this is going to have an effect, and you'll see Dwyane start the next game against Phoenix. But anyway, let's get to Riley because we were all anxiously awaiting this interview that our buddy Dan Le Batard, check out our episode 100 in our library with Dan. It's terrific. In which he actually talks about Pat a lot and says that he doesn't think the game has passed Pat by, but signing Dwyane Wade to a 4-year deal is what that might look like, which I thought was a great quote from Dan. But Dan had this sit down on his new show, his new conversation show on ESPN. Pat was his first guest. If you're not familiar, Dan and Pat, have developed a very close relationship over the years. Dan has sort of saved Pat from himself a couple of times, which we won't speak on anymore. But he has, I would call it more than the typical, close reporter, subject relationship. I think it's more of a close friendship. We can talk, at times, because something I've struggled with as a sports writer about kind of where that line is. I think Dan had it with Ricky Williams a little bit, but it is what it is. And it to the point that, when the Pat Dwyane stuff was going on in 2016, you and I had Dan on our show to basically take the Riley perspective while I took the Wade perspective. And I thought we were basically proxies for the two of them. To the point that we probably could have hammered out a deal in those 30 minutes if somebody had let us. That's actually my favorite radio that I did, on that show, just because, and not because it wasn't you or Israel or somebody else, my co-host, talking, but I thought we kind of nailed it with that, and so they have a relationship that goes way back, and so it was kind of natural that Pat would be Dan's first guest. I thought it was interesting. A lot about Pat's background, a lot of which we know or I've written, others have written. I wrote it in a Bleacher Report one-on-one I had with Pat in 2015, where he spoke to a lot of his background and his history. But what was interesting to me about it, Chris, especially because Pat has not spoken to the media, and we've talked about this. Asked Ira last night, had Pat ever not spoken after making a trade? He didn't think it was that unusual because he said, they didn't acquire anybody because they don't really view Ryan Anderson as an acquisition. But I still thought it was odd. I can't remember any time where Pat hasn't spoken after the deadline, after being active in some way. And so kind of stuck out to me. So we were waiting for this interview for him to say something. And then there was this great tease about how when LeBron that ESPN's been putting out about how when LeBron walked out the door, He saw, a 10-year dynasty, go away, which again, similar. He's used the phrase generational team. He did it again with me in that piece. He's used it other stuff. Not new, but it was interesting that he would bring up LeBron again. That didn't air in the piece. And there was only one mention of the Heat, like even beyond 2006, okay, which was about Zoe. There was like nothing from the last 13 years, like to the point that a lot of us think there's going to be a part 2 and a part 3 to this thing because they didn't even use the LeBron tease. It wasn't even in there. And the only thing he said about currently is that he essentially said he was committed to Eric and to Mickey. Those are the two names he mentioned. Usually he mentions Andy too, but he was committed to Eric and to Mickey to see this thing through and to chase another championship. So I guess, what did you make of the interview? What was said, what was not said, what was not aired, and kind of where it stands with Pat right now?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things formatted for time, definitely. I don't know because I think a live sporting event must have run over because I DVR'd it, and they were re-airing the Reggie Miller 30 for 30 with Spike Lee, and it ran like 9 minutes over. So I actually only got what was on my DVR, and I was obviously surprised that that portion of it wasn't really used, but at the same time, I mean, they're trying to build a narrative. They're trying to talk about his classic car collection. They're trying to talk about his life, and I think those are things that are interesting to Dan as opposed to the day-to-day Heat stuff. But I do think that at the same time they lost that opportunity to build that newsworthiness. But to me, the thing, him talking about, I want to continue to build out a contender, I want to continue to try and win, I'm surprised that he is that committed to this because I would just assume that a man in his early to mid 70s is nearing the stage where, I mean, I'm looking at this team and I don't know how I'm going to leave it. I really think he's only staying because I can't leave like this. That's really his only, and why he probably laments the LeBron thing is because maybe at some point, he lets the LeBron thing go, maybe moves into an advisory role and lets someone else take charge of it. But I don't think that he's really is on board for any other reason than I've got to fix this. I can't leave the organization like this. But isn't he even at a place where he can? And that, to me, the most amazing thing about Pat is that obviously you look at him on the show and he's builds up his mythology and he's recalling like moment from he shows you why he's had so much success with this. I mean, he's like recalling moment for moment the 84 finals or the 85 finals or whichever one he's talking about, and he's just a savant, and you can understand why he has the ultimate confidence in himself. But I do kind of I watch this with a little bit less of an aura around Pat Riley, and that for me has kind of been the disappointing bit about these last 2 years, and why we talk about sad retirements as it relates to players, and why that might also apply to Riley, because there is just that loss of his reputation, and maybe he should talk more because he reminds us more of why people have the ultimate respect for him. And I did feel a bit of that leaving the interview. Is you understand why he's this legendary figure, but I mean maybe there should be more communication about how this is going to work and how this is going to change. But I can't believe that that we've reached a stage that 4 years on, 5 years on from the Big Three era that I'm thinking about Pat Riley in these terms, and I'm questioning whether he can fix it when he put the ultimate thing together. I just can't believe that it's come to this.
Dan did a South Beach sessions with Pat when he was doing those before he's brought them back now. But what was it, about 3 years ago? I guess It was not that long after LeBron left, and I remember because I cited it when I interviewed him. So it's actually got to be 4 years ago now. And Pat's, I would say the aura thing has faded a little bit since then. Like it was not. Because it was before he panicked, right? I mean, like, it was one thing to say, well, you lost LeBron. And we can all, there's a lot of different reasons that are given for why LeBron left, whether you dealt with LeBron's camp a lot as I did, or whether you dealt with the Heat a lot as I did. There's totally different reasons. There's people inside the Heat organization who basically give reasons that have never been publicly aired, okay? And I'm not going to do it here. But there's just a lot of reasons that have been given. And so there was enough sort of smoke out there that was hard, fog, I would say is a better term than smoke, that it was really hard to just pin it on Pat. But look what's happened since. You had the 2016 debacle with Dwyane, which followed the 2015 uncomfortable situation with Dwyane. So for the casuals who would have gone to their grave for Pat, like gone to the mat in any situation, now you had Pat pitted against someone they liked better, like who had given them more, okay, which is very hard to do in this town. I mean, Pat is on the Mount Rushmore, but Dwyane's head is bigger on it. Okay, I think, and so I just think that created this thing where Pat was no longer infallible, and then that got compounded by the panic of 2016. Maybe Tyler Johnson was Mickey's fault, but even so, the panic, of the Whiteside move, which whether you defended at the time or not, which I did, obviously has sort of not worked out that well. Even now, like you recouped a little bit, but not what you'd hoped when you signed him to a max contract. And then the disastrous summer of 2017, which we're not going to revisit. And then him putting himself in this position where they may have done a really good job of recruiting Kevin Durant or Gordon Hayward or going after Jimmy Butler or any of the other players that they've tried to get, Kawhi, who I know they threw everybody on the table for, but because of previous mistakes, it was a lost cause. Like they could do the greatest job in the world, and the chances were still minimal that they were going to pull it off. And so I do think that the aura has faded. I do think you and I are going to do an episode because I want to compare it to the end of Shula, and we need to find the right guests for that. We're working on it, but I think we have a guest in mind who I think would be really good on that topic. But that's where it is. And so I think about the interview. To me, I mean, you mentioned how he doesn't want to go out like this. He said that in the interview. ESPN didn't play that clip either. That was the big tease. Was one of the teases I saw for this was that Dwyane saying in the 2006 finals, I ain't going out like that, right? I ain't going out like this, right? After Pat wrote playoffs, right? He wrote playoffs on the grease board. It's this iconic moment, right? The 15 strong thing. I ain't going out like this. And Pat tells Batard that. He says, I feel this, I ain't going out like this. I don't know why ESPN didn't run that either. Like, it makes me feel like there's more coming. But you're right. He doesn't want to go out like this. When I interviewed him in 2015 and I asked him what it's going to take for him to walk away, he says, when we win another championship, Chris, not Bosch, but Riley, his wife, of 48 years, we're heading to a plane and we're turning everything off and we're going to Paris. You won't even see me. He's like, there won't be champagne. I don't believe him on this, but he said there won't be champagne. There won't be a post-game presser. There won't be anything. We'll win a title and you'll never see us again. Like that was his image in his head. But that's not going to happen, right? Yeah. Like that's not going to happen.
Not without some dramatic turn of fortune, yeah.
I mean, dramatic. Are they, even though they're a great destination, could we reasonably say they're closer to a championship than the Panthers because the Panthers never get anything right? Are they reasonably, as much as they've been the gold standard organization in this town, can't take that away from them ever. We're mentioning 5th losing season in 24. Okay, it's remarkable. He's been an icon. He's Mount Rushmore, everything else. But are they necessarily closer to a championship than the Miami Marlins right now? Really?
I mean, both teams are starting from and we can do this comparison as much as we want. Everyone's starting from nothing, right? So the Marlins have these prospects. The Heat can have a blank slate of cap space in 2 years, and the Dolphins can draft a quarterback #1 overall in a year's time and start from there. But realistically, right now, everyone's got nothing. Maybe the University of Miami has something, because, they've got a coach and you can recruit and those things can prove to be the difference in a way that they just can't be in professional sports. And then, the Panthers, like you said, I think they're far away because they're trading for cap space, right? I don't know if they're going to do anything before the deadline, but they're in a cap space mode. And it sort of makes me think that they don't think what they have is enough when I think that was our impression of it. But yeah, everyone's starting from nothing. And so can Pat Riley with a blank slate, first off, at this point, can he really be trusted to have a blank slate? Because right now the joke of the Heat is that anyone who does anything good for them is going to get a 4-year, $40 million deal. Like, can you really expect that when Goran Dragic opts out or is on a new contract that he's not given a multi-year extension, or that what does the Bam Adebayo extension look like? What does Justice Winslow's extension look like? Like, can you even really be trusted to have a blank slate? And then if he does have one, what does that look like? And who can you bring in and who's going to be attracted to this situation? Miami has kind of taken themselves out of the running. What happens when they get back in the running? And is that going to be enough to lead them towards a championship? So I just think that everyone right now is starting from nothing. And to me, the fact that Pat Riley this late in life still wants to start from nothing and go again, I admire it. Obviously, there is definitely an ageist element to, say, oh, he's so old. Why would he want to carry on? Like, if he wants to carry on, he can carry on. But
yeah,
I'm amazed. I'm amazed that he wants to.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I want to be very clear on this. Maybe I should have said this at the very start of the podcast, and I'm going to be clear on this going forward. I think the things that have happened over the past 3 years with this franchise would get most executives fired. Would. That's not me saying that they should in this case. Those are two different things. Most other franchises, if you sign the kind of contracts, these kind of players or those kind of contracts, you're gone in 3 years. You just are. I mean, and especially when you're still trying to dig out of it and everything else that's happened and this muddled roster and all the rest. Like, other guys would get fired. But that is totally different than me saying he should be. Okay? And I want to make that clear. He has earned the right to go out on his terms. All right? And so in the same way I felt that Shula did earn the right to go out on his terms. A discussion we'll have another day. But this would get you fired somewhere else. It would. And so, if it wasn't him with that track record working for this owner in this market, with everything else that Pat has accomplished, it's just, if you just looked at it and put it on a slate, it is what it is. I mean, it's been bad. And so, but I want to make that very, very clear. I'm not going to call for Pat's firing at any time. Maybe more power being given to some others of the organization. I feel like I've heard that has started to happen a little bit in some cases, and Pat has deferred a little bit more on some things. That I think is responsible at this stage. But I also am not going to be ageist about this. I don't care how old he is. I really don't. He can be 88 years old. If he's still good at this, like, let him do it. Like, I don't have a problem with that. But the question is he still good at it? Okay. And I think, I'm not going to judge him on Jimmy Butler, and I'm not going to judge him on Gordon Hayward, and I'm not going to judge him on Kevin Durant. So let's stop with all that. Those particular circumstances.
I think Jimmy Butler, I mean, you definitely know more than me, but was there anything more he could have done?
I don't know.
Like, to me, the way that it looks from the outside is he might have reached a stage where he overvalued his own guy in Richardson and pulled him for the trade, so that, because you've never really been under the impression that Richardson was really offered in earnest, and that for me would be a mistake.
I had heard that when he was offered with conditions, which was basically having to take something Minnesota didn't want. Now that reporting of mine has been contradicted by others, and so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna challenge that much. If it was Richardson, Olynyk, and a first, I think that's a perfectly reasonable offer for a guy who is going to be a free agent at the end of the season, who's been trouble with a lot of different teammates. I wasn't really that much in favor of it. Look, they may, if they could have clear cap somehow, they could be a player for Jimmy Butler in the offseason, because I don't think it's guaranteed that he and Tobias Harris are both staying in Philly. I mean, if they flame out in the first round or even the second round, Tobias, I think, is a better fit with the other two guys that they have than Jimmy is, because he's a better shooter. So, and he's an easier personality to deal with by far. So they may get another crack at Jimmy Butler. I'm not going to criticize him for those three moves. My criticism is strictly reserved for the 2 summers that made it impossible. Like, as I've said many times, it's like, if you're elite at something that you do, don't handicap yourself to such a degree to make it as hard as possible. It's like deciding to play Madden or 2K on championship level when you're first starting. Like, why would you make it that hard on yourself? And I feel like that's what he and the organization did to themselves. They did this to themselves. Like, they are the premier organization in this town. They're one of the premier organizations in the NBA. And the only way that they were going to take themselves out of the conversation was, frankly, to just do a bunch of stupid things in a row. And they did. And that's where we are. So, but I'm fine with him staying. Age is not a factor to me. It seems like he wants to stay. It seems like he wants to take another crack at this. I just wonder this, and we can close with this, Chris. I just wonder how long they're going to be able to keep it together. So if he's going to be there indefinitely, where's Shane's upside? Mm-hmm. Where's, Nick, I mean, is basically owns the team, obviously along with Mickey, he handles a lot of other stuff. Does Adam Simon stay forever? Chet has already sort of moved to the side. And the biggest question I have is the coach. Like, he's been in this organization for 23 years.
Yes, he's been a head coach for 11.
Right. He's the second longest tenured coach with his own team in the NBA, and the other one, Greg Popovich, could retire at any moment. I mean, he beats Rick Carlisle by, I think, 3 days as current tenure with the team. Carlisle coached, obviously, Detroit and Indiana before he went to Dallas. But Eric's been here forever. He's got a baby, okay, which changed his life. He's been traveling, okay, for, decade plus. He had more than that. He had one of the most pressurized jobs in the world in any field for 4 years. I mean, he looks to me, like I said, just from the outside. I haven't communicated with him directly about this. I'm just saying he just looks tired to me. He looks frustrated to me. He's never said a bad word about Pat publicly. There's been acknowledgement after the fact, that they didn't really speak, for like a month during a championship run. There's more friction there at times than I think commonly gets reported. I've heard of some scenarios that, that have been there. Eric's his own man in a lot of different ways, even though he is incredibly reverential when he speaks about Pat, and rightly so, because Pat gave him, an enormous break, and the first time, just keeping him around, okay, as the video guy, and then obviously, anointing him to be the head coach, and then keeping him as the head coach when they brought in the big three, and then keeping him as the head coach when LeBron wanted him out initially. Like, Pat has done great things for Eric, and he should show reverence to Pat. But like, it's 23 years of the same damn voice. Like, how, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I just wonder. I wonder how long this is sustainable to kind of keep everybody aligned and under the same roof when it's apparent that it's been wearing on a lot of different people, the way that this has played out. And, we'll see. But I hope that we get to hear more of the Riley interview with Dan, because Dan gets the best stuff out of Pat. And I feel like there was really compelling stuff about Pat and his wife, and about the stuff we've heard before about Zoe telling him to, go talk to the fucking team and do his fucking job and all that. We've heard all that. But like, if there's anything else about what direction is for the franchise, because he hasn't given it lately. He hasn't given it.
Yeah. And he hasn't, and he's not gonna, I don't know. I mean, he can be at times exceedingly honest, but there can be a moment where he just goes, you know what, guys? I really screwed this up. like he hasn't, like, I remember, last year, during the year, right now we're, in the top 6, but, that's not good enough, and we're not happy with that. And he was, still trying to, convey some sense of optimism. But, I mean, obviously after this year, like, what do you say other than I screwed up? And I think he's probably too proud to ever do that. And he's obviously got guys under contract, so he can't really. But I think that's, at this point, I don't know if it's what I want to hear, because it would probably make me sad. But I think it's there has to be some acknowledgement of, okay, we had a bad plan and we need to fix it.
But he's done this before. I think part of what's keeping him from doing it now is that saying that publicly basically acknowledges that certain guys on your roster shouldn't be there, and you don't want them there anymore. So it's hard for him to say it. I think
that has to be followed up with action, whether it's waving or whatever.
Right. You can't just say that. Like, we made a bunch of dumb moves in 2017, and everybody checks this out. Oh, who signed in 2017? Okay, now we got it. Like, he's not going to do that. And also, again, not reporting this, but if he's not aligned with everybody in there about things, like him saying something could affect, the way that somebody else does their job, right? So I get it to a certain degree. All I've said is it's unusual that he hasn't in some way addressed it, because he is one of the great talkers of all time in sports. And one of the things he's done consistently, and I used to regret this because it drove me insane, is I would go down to, when I was a columnist for the Sentinel in particular for 8 years, I would go down to write a critical column about Pat. And then in the first 5 minutes of his presser, he would destroy himself. Okay. And I'd be like, oh, I kind of feel bad for him now. Like, I'm not, and he was great. It was like the preemptive strike, right? Like, against the whole situation. He's a master at this. I mean, if you read anything he's ever written, he's a brilliant, brilliant person, but it hasn't been good. And it's like, nobody can directly acknowledge it. And so you just get whispers from different parts of the organization. And that's basically where you're at. And it's a strange place for them to be. But we'll have more on this as we go forward. We went long on this one, but just start Dwyane Wade, okay? Start Dwyane Wade.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Ringer Podcast. Thank you so much.